What's up? I hope everyone is having a great week. This is the Podcast Playbook podcast about podcasting, starting a podcast, that kind of thing. There is more to it than just podcasting, and so I'm still toying with the name of Podcast Playbook because with podcasting, you get a lot more things that you can do and add to your social media channels. And so I really want to help people, if they're going to start a podcast, launch a podcast, or they already have one, how they can use their podcast to make their business more money, right? That's my whole goal in this. I want to help you make more money because with a podcast, and if you use it correctly, your business can make more money. And I'm geared more towards small businesses, local businesses, entrepreneurs. Apple doesn't need me. Google doesn't need me. It's not that. It's the small businesses that could use an extra $500 a month or whatever they make from ads and sponsorships from their podcast and their social media clips that come out of that podcast. And that's my whole goal in this is I want to teach you. I want to help you. I would love to take on some clients eventually and get paid to do this. But right now I'm giving it away for free at this point. So that's pretty cool. And so last week we talked about why even start a podcast. You can go back and listen to that episode. But this week I want to talk about the whole point of having something specific to talk about, right? Because you might be sitting here thinking like, well, I don't have anything to talk about. I just own a bakery. Yeah, you got tons to talk about. Your first episode could be your story of why you decided to start a bakery, why you decided to open a bakery in Newport Beach, or why you opened a bakery in Edmond, Oklahoma. That could be your first episode. People get to know you, that kind of thing. Then from that episode, if you do a 30-minute episode of how you became who you are and owning a bakery, you can take 5, 6, 7 clips, I guarantee you, out of that podcast to then use as social media clips on YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, /X, LinkedIn, MySpace. Just kidding. But you get the point. Your podcast is a gold mine for shorts. And that's where everything's been trending the last couple years is short form video. And so that's the benefit of recording a podcast because you can get snippets out of your podcast that are 20 seconds long, 45 seconds long, a minute and a half long that you can then upload to social media. But anyways, back to my point of what can you talk about? Well, first off, I don't know how to pronounce this word, but is it niche? I think it's niche. Anyways, the idea is to have your lane. What lane are you in? So if you have started a bakery, like I said, your story of why you started the bakery, you could have another episode of the ingredients you use and where you source those ingredients from. You can have another podcast episode of you baking cinnamon rolls and going through the process of that. You, as a bakery owner in Edmond, Oklahoma, you could have guests from your city on your podcast talking to you and you can interview them, whether they own a coffee shop or they're a realtor or they're a dentist in your community. Interview those people because that's a win-win for you and for that other small business owner that you're interviewing because it's going to give you guys advertising for free using a podcast and social media for both of you. So that's a win-win. And it's another win-win if that person who you're interviewing, if it's a coffee shop owner, they post clips from that on their social media and you post it on your social media. I'm telling you, you can make more money by just implementing a podcast into whatever you're already doing. Like I'm sure all these businesses, like I know real estate agents and bakery owners, coffee shop owners, they have social media channels, but do they have a podcast? Some of them probably do. Some of them might, but I bet I shouldn't say most because I don't think most. I think it's a small percent that have a podcast. But if you figure out that you can implement a podcast into your weekly or once every 2-week routine of creating content, that's, like I said, a gold mine for extra content. And it doesn't take much time out of your day, out of your week, out of your month. You could do a podcast every week. You could do one every 2 weeks. You could do a podcast a month. That's up to you. However you want to do it. Obviously, in this day and age, the more content that you get out there, the more and more people are going to see you, hear about you. People are going to come into your bakery. People are going to come into your coffee shop. They're going to maybe hire you as a realtor. All of these things are going to happen, and it's going to open more doors for more opportunity and in the end, more money for your small business, your entrepreneurship, whatever that is that you are doing. And so, like I said, whatever your job is, your local business, that is what your podcast needs to be about, right? And especially in a community, if you are in a small town, if, like I said, Edmond, Oklahoma, or Newport Beach, like that can also be part of your niche because you're a small business in that town, right? So again, if you're a realtor in San Clemente, California, talk about the real estate market because that's what you know. That is what is, I got some technical difficulties here. Talk about what you know. Talk about that real estate market in San Clemente. What is the average cost of a house right now? What's popular? What are people looking for? Are people looking for condos or apartments or single family houses? What does it look like to live on the beach or within a mile of the beach in San Clemente? That's your podcast. Have on, if you're a realtor, have on a mortgage loan officer, mortgage loan originator. Have on a mortgage guy to come on and talk about the mortgage world right now and what's happening and kind of where rates are and where you think, that kind of thing. That can be your podcast as a realtor. And then doing that interview with the mortgage loan officer or talking about just San Clemente real estate market, you're again going to have 5, 6, 7 clips to take out of that podcast and use on your social media channels. And again, the more you do this, staying consistent, you can find sponsors. You can find advertisements to help out your podcast, especially local businesses. I guarantee you could find another local business to help sponsor your podcast, which then in turn gives you maybe a little money or, some bartering, for instance. Like, again, if you're a real estate agent and you get a coffee shop to sponsor your podcast, maybe it's not necessarily monetary money that you get in return. Maybe you get free coffee or you get one free meal a week or however you set it up. That's up to you. That's the really cool thing about podcasting is you can figure this out and make the rules up as you go along. There's no real rhyme or reason to, I guess I shouldn't say that. I mean, there is to podcasting, but it's your deal. It's your baby. So you talk about what your passions are, what also your audience wants to hear. Because if you own a bakery in Newport Beach and you start a podcast about snow skiing, that might be great. And you might have a huge passion for snow skiing, but that's not necessarily going to help your small business. That could be a side project if you want to do that. But this is mainly geared around if you have a small business, start a podcast about your small business. Start a podcast talking about your small business and what you do as a business owner. That's where the sweet spot is. And that's why having a niche is important. Okay. And trust me, I've learned this from experience. I've had podcasts where I kind of go in and out about different things. Because I really wanted to be a sports broadcaster when I went to college. That's why I went to college. I wanted to do sports. I wanted to be a sports reporter, play-by-play, whatever it might be, sports talk radio. That's what I wanted to do. And so then I started a podcast and it was geared around sports, but then I implemented some other things and just random stuff, and you'll notice your listenership goes down when you start doing that. And then I started up another podcast that was just NBA. Okay? That podcast had dedicated listeners that loved the NBA. And so I knew with that niche, I had to stick to NBA because if I started wandering off or whatever, I was going to lose those listeners, and who knows if I would gain more or what it might look like. And so I'm going to butcher this, but there's this thing like if you are like doing a podcast or hosting a podcast, I'm going to see how I can use this. I'm thinking of this as I go, and you stick to a niche about your bakery in Newport Beach, you are going to have listeners who live in and around Newport Beach, probably within the 25-mile radius of Newport Beach will be who your key listeners are to your podcast about your bakery and what you do. And that's awesome. And that might only get you, a certain amount of listeners, but it's going to get you dedicated listeners who not only will listen to your podcast and find you on your social channels, but they're going to come in to your bakery and buy baked goods from you. Does that make sense? That's in how I see it as using a podcast for that, because you could have a podcast about whatever it is, but you might just have, and you could have way more listeners, but they're just casual listeners who aren't going to buy anything from you, who aren't going to support you, but they like listening to your podcast, which is cool, but they might live in wherever, Montana or New York City, and they're not going to be buying from your bakery. And so I hope that makes sense in some way. It's the same with realtor. Like if you're a realtor and you have a podcast about you're a realtor in San Clemente Real Estate Podcast. Obviously, you're going to have people in and around San Clemente listening to that podcast, right? You might have some wherever, but those in that radius who are listening to it are going to be the ones who maybe use you to help buy a house, to help you find a house. And so that's why you need to stick with a niche. Obviously it's okay to talk about other things, maybe a little bit, like especially in an interview, that kind of thing. But that's what social media is for. That's what your Instagram is for. Like your Instagram posts and reels should be about your business. Your stories should be your life. Like that's kind of how social media is working right now. If you're out fishing, put that in your stories. But your posts should be all geared towards your small local business. And that's where the niche part comes in. That's where the focus comes in. And so again, figure out what exactly it is you want to talk about and who you want to talk to. This also helps you identify your target audience, right? Because if you own a coffee shop in Edmond, Oklahoma, your target audience isn't skiers in Colorado, right? And so that's where this idea of having a podcast for your business will help you make money. If you want to do a hobby podcast and talk about NBA basketball or snow skiing in Colorado, that would be a great hobby side hustle that you could do, obviously, but try to stick to the niche of what exactly it is your small business does, who you cater to, who your clients are, your location. If you do that and stay consistent, you're going to have more listeners, which then brings in more opportunity for sponsors and ads, and it's also going to bring in more foot traffic to your local business. I guarantee it. Because all eyes right now are on social media. Eyes are on Twitter and TikTok and Instagram and YouTube Shorts and Facebook. That's where the eyes are. Like I'm telling you, like people are at home, they're watching a football game or they're watching a TV show and an ad comes on the TV. Most people are picking up their phones to scroll for the 1 minute or 2 minutes. And so if you're putting out content from your podcast onto social media, people are going to stumble upon that. And so choose that perfect topic for your business, right? So, and that's what I want to help people understand. And starting a podcast might sound scary. And I talked about this in the last episode, so you can go back and listen to that. It's way easier than it used to be. It's way cheaper than it used to be to start a podcast. And so if you're even thinking about starting a podcast, you might want to start a podcast, please reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram. Those are probably the two best places at John W. Snyder, JohnWSnyder. And I would love to help you out, figure out that sweet spot, that niche of what you want to talk about and what you should be talking about to help bring in, again, more customers, more listeners, more eyes to your social media channels. The other thing too, with like picking that topic, be authentic. Like be authentic, be yourself. Obviously if you're talking about your business and how it started and why you started it, that is authenticity. That's who you are. And so I don't think you would stray from that, but just be yourself. Like, that's the one other piece of advice that I want to give. And then the other huge thing with figuring out that topic that you're going to talk about, that niche that you are going to be speaking on, make sure you are providing value to your listeners or solving a problem, right? So make sure that you are doing that with your podcast. Because if you're not adding value, if you're not solving a problem, then odds are they're going to tune out. Listeners are going to tune out. So that's the other main point about that specific topic that you talk about. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope it made sense. Again, like I said, if it did not, please reach out to me and we can discuss further. I'll put the links in the show notes wherever you listen to this podcast, but there'll be links to my Instagram and Twitter. And I also have a podcast newsletter that comes out once a week. And so you can subscribe to that. It's absolutely free. Everything I'm providing right now is free. And so I just want to help you. I want to help people, and I want to help you and your business make more money through social media by having a podcast. Thanks a lot. See you later.